Hello everybody and welcome to episode 9 of Legends and Friends Go Global. I understand the episodes are coming out at a bit of a drip and drab, but I'm trying my very best to make sure what I put out is actually of decent entertainment quality. And today I'm just going to take a step back through all the noise and make sure I can describe the last few months of the fledgling club as best I can. I've even got a stopwatch going on my second monitor so I can make sure I don't dawdle for far too long. So without further ado, let's quickly discuss the fixtures since we last met. This was way back when we played against Liverpool and got a hiding against Jurgen Klopp's men, and they went on to lose that Ruby Championship final, incidentally, to Atletico Madrid, who should still have Diego Simeone in charge, and that is indeed correct. So I didn't end up losing to the champions, but it was a tough defeat nevertheless. On to a match against Sassuolo, who we did defeat previously in the season, as far as I remember. Yeah, we bet them 3-2. It was a 1-1 draw, but it could have been a lot worse as my tactics went spectacularly wrong, and when I eventually got three strikers onto the pitch, I think maybe I went 4-2-3-1 or something, and we got the equaliser. We didn't really deserve, but that's just the way it went. The stats aren't very clear here, but if we can look over here at the analysis, did I show you the stats? I don't know. Yeah, so you can kind of see there, Sassuolo were far, far better, and they shouldn't have been held to a draw, in my opinion, but Brian Wheeler did a great job. So you can see highlights going on in the background. We're not too interested in them. Into the Bronze Cup, and we got a victory over Pachuca, and they were the team that beat us 6-5. It was a Van Der on the double there, very big surprise in my opinion. And then another disappointing result in the league, a goalless draw against Club Brugge. And as far as I'm aware, that was the first time we had been held goalless, since September actually. So that's a very, very long time. We have lost games without scoring, but to be in a goalless draw, that's a very rare thing. But we turned on the style in our third place playoff against Juventus. They didn't really have the energy to compete, but even so, they are one of the best teams in the Diamond League. They are currently sat third, which is great, but they could possibly regain the second place over the Spanish stranglehold. But it was the goals from Ji Minghao, Jonathan Schmid and Zhang Suasi that delivered the bronze medal to the Hall of Famers. And we got back into winning form in the league. It took us a while to get going, but it was victory for the boys away from home in the Tela Parken. And then Pachuca defeated us again in the league, and this was a huge surprise as we are very, very strong at home. If we can cross over to the league table now, Pachuca have beaten us on both occasions, and they certainly kept their mettle that time around. But if we look at the home record, that was the very first home defeat we felt all season long, and that is as big a disappointment as we've had all season. To lose our memory lane undefeated streak is highly disappointing. So I have to just put up my hands and say it wasn't good enough, but we recovered very nicely against Levante with 6 goals and just the 2 against. So it was Brian Wheeler, Fusiani Cisse, Jonathan Schmid and Jairo Mesa who again scored from the penalty spot. But we had 2 penalties in this game, so it was a very fair result in my opinion. They were both blatant, so there are no complaints there. And now 2 season-defining games coming up here. I know I've said season-defining 2 or 3 times already, but we're playing Stoke in the Bronze Cup semi-final with the possibility of Celtic to come, who are already in the final actually. Yes, they will be playing in the Bronze Cup final. If we are able to defeat them, it will be us against the boys. And then we play Celtic for the very first time all season. That is huge. I've been waiting all this time, and it's nearly the end of the whole campaign, and we finally get to bring them to memory lane for a huge game that will be live commed sometime in the not too distant future. So that's everything in the results game, but we'll talk about the league in a bit more detail now. I kind of skimmed over it there. So as you can see, our form is probably the worst it's been all season. But then again, Celtic haven't got much of a lead despite their 3 games in hand. But we have to do better with the limited time we have on our side. But I know 6 points against Celtic will, in all probability, win us the league. But if we are to be defeated even once, it could be a very difficult task to become the champions. Mainz, however, should be deposed from the automatic promotion place very soon. They have played 34 times and they are on 1 point more than us. So that really goes to show how we should be coming at least second. So as you can see, clubs are starting to fall by the wayside in the bottom half of the table. Anything from 9th place downwards are in deep trouble. Funnily enough, Bordeaux still have a chance of not being in the relegation playoffs. But I'm very, very worried for Red Bull Salzburg. I sense their time is up in the Bronze League. Copenhagen, as you saw, I got a win against them. I think they'll be going down. Atalanta, I thought they were a very strong outfit, but I suppose they've lost some key players. And Frankfurt, they still have a chance to survive, but it is going to be very, very tight against San Lorenzo and possibly the likes of Sampdoria as well. So we'll look at Atalanta here and just see what went wrong. So they were doing okay for quite a while, but they have been near enough the bottom for most of the season. As for the Hall of Famers, you can see it's been a long grind. We haven't been top of the league at all this season. So if we're going to do it, we'll need to hurry up and make sure we get the job done. Now, I'd like to move on to the squad dynamics for you very briefly. The trouble, of course, of having 40 fantastic players at my disposal is that everyone wants their chance in the first team, and they're starting to rebel against me and saying, oh, please play me more often, or be angry. Despite their 20 loyalty to me, it is very difficult to keep everyone on the same wavelength. As for the hierarchy of the players, you can still see it's kind of stabling out now. Van der just needs to leave the other player section, or maybe he's forced to be there, as you maybe have to have other players here. I'm not too sure how the hierarchy works, but certainly no player will be leaving to sign for new clubs. They'll either retire or they might just have to move on. But anyway, the big 3 players you'd expect are there: Fusiani Cisse, Zhang Suosi and Alouine Diawara. Players I'd like to see up here in the team leadership role will probably be Quentin Bernardo, Yair Mesa, and possibly certainly Brian Wheeler could do more. He should be a bit higher given how fantastic he's been this season. In the social groups category, we have the core social group there, the Le Mans FC players, and we have Ian Shetty there. He's all on his own, but he must have made a lot of friends. We've Wisniewski and Schmid there from FM14. Down here in secondary groups, we have the Chesterfield of Dreams players, Exposito there from Sturm Graz and FM14. Evander hasn't made it all the way up to the top with the fact that, where would he be? Yeah, Andreini and Evander kind of there on their own. And then down in secondary group B, we Van Gran and Radaby from South Africa, Osbrackley and Masakni. I'm surprised they haven't found other ways to be friendly with everyone else. But one thing I can now mention is the regens. We got some regens into the club for the very first time. If we can probably show you them now. The most exciting one here is Pedro Pulido, excuse me. He's already looking very, very strong for a youth candidate, and he can play in the hole behind the striker. And he's already got 20 determination. He's got a work rate that could be improved, but you can see he's a great decision maker. He's very strong with his vision. It's just a matter of his technical attributes that I'd like to see improved. And he could take some free kicks and corners for us, which is always useful for someone trying to make a name for themselves. Other strong candidates, perhaps we have Sam Mathias from France. He's a centre-back, and while he doesn't look it right now, he could possibly gain a little bit of potential. But these are the kind of lads I'd probably sell on if they aren't of use to me. But maybe we could kind of break kayfabe, so to speak, and allow some of these characters into the team when they are not technically a legendary player for me. But there we go. We certainly don't have an issue with money, for example. If we can now switch that back, and we'll certainly keep an eye on them. And if we have to, we'll let them move on to new clubs and see how they get on. But money is not an issue whatsoever. The amount of success we've had either in the league or in the cup competitions means that we've nearly doubled our money from 100 million to start to over 190 million. So if we look at the income since the start of the season, so how do you compare it? So we'll look at the expenditure. So yeah, there you go. It's a gap of nearly 90 million, and that certainly makes a change. I'm so familiar with clubs being in debt, and that's just the way it goes. But there we go. Money is not an issue in the say. If we're not selling players, we don't need to buy players unless something terrible happens. But now let's get to the most important part of this episode. It is the players' statistics since the start of the season. So we'll look at where we need to go. Competitions overall. So here we are. This is how everyone has done since day one this season. All competitions are considered. And let's find out who my favourite players to play are. So without further ado, Jordan Martin, by virtue of playing in more substitution, he's been a substitute more often, I should say. He has played the most games for me. And Zhang Suosi, even though it's been quite a while since I've had him stably in the team, he's also played 20 times, as has Alouine Diawara. But with a small concussion, he won't be making his 21st start for a little while. Du Shuang comes in 4th place there in the midfield. So midfield is probably where I need to rotate the most, but some very familiar names. Then Brian Lenihan burst through for the Chesterfield contingent. He's been a pretty good player for me, not quite outstanding, but there we go. Further down the list you can see more Le Mans FC players, where we have Bernardo, who should have played more often, but I have 2 very hungry goalkeepers wanting their fair share of games. Look at Angelini on 17 appearances. The top striker on the list is Fusiani Cisse. Very hard goings to keep everyone up front and excited. But there you go. Fusiani has played 16 times from the start. And then we'll scroll down a bit further down. Brian Wheeler has scored more goals than he's started games, which is fantastic. Van Gran, similar situation there. Kai Wisniewski, another player who's making more goals than starts, and we're going down to the bottom, and you can see some players are yet to play from start 10 times, which is really disappointing. Either injuries have gotten in the way, or maybe they just haven't really impressed me enough to be picked from the start. So the least picked players, we've got Anthony Delad. He is kind of in a weak position as he's my worst striker, and he's not really a great attacking midfielder either. But I still appreciate what he's done for me in the past, and I hope we can select him a bit more, a few more times. Yair Mesa had a horrible injury for the majority of the season, so he's only really starting to make appearances now. Gary Roberts has another big injury, and he might be out to the end of the season. Ronnie Pino had a bad injury, and he hasn't really had his fair chance. And then Jason Wood, again, injuries have played a part in him not being able to be picked, as the case for Oscar Ackley as well. So that's kind of a shame, but let's get to the exciting stuff, the goals. And it's Brian Wheeler who scored the brace in the last game. He's back on top of this list, but it's very, very competitive between the bulk of my players, and this is certainly what I like to see. It's very, very rare to have strikers they're all evenly matched. But it's Brian Wheeler, 16 in all competitions. Wisniewski and Van Gran, 15. Fusiani Cisse, I'd like to see him do better. He's tied with Chevy Shrivers on 13. And Yair Mesa has 7, which is really good. Cyril Michaud and Jonathan Schmid, who can play on the wing, they both have 6. Evander surprisingly has 5. Jiming Hao and Anthony Delad tied for 4. Javicic, Amrani have 3. Jamal Hoogland makes a defensive contribution with 2. As well, we have midfielders Jason Wood and Vanya Matrian. Barry Sherman with 2 goals. Jordan Martin 2. Zhang Suosi 2. Exposito 2. Stephen Kinsella and Gary Roberts also more than 1. 1 goal each for Brian Boring, Frank Reeds, Du Shuang, Alouine Diawara and Yusuf Misakni. Big names that have yet to score. I see Ronnie Pino there. Jose Adi Carlos. Ali Bamba, of course, he's very rare. rarely scoring goals, and then it's mostly just the other defenders that are not really doing what I like to see, but they are keeping clean sheets, which is the most important thing. The assists table, it's a three-way tie between Van Graan, Kinsella and Evander. They've played about 15 games or less, which is pretty impressive anyway. Kai Wisniewski and Brian Wheeler each have 8. Jonathan Schmid 7, Misho 6, and we'll scroll down to the bottom where a lot of players have at least one assist to their name, even some of the defenders, and even Quentin Bernardo in goal. That's excellent. Big players yet to make assists, Rasmus Stephenson and Du Shuang. They're defensive midfielders, so I don't really expect too much there. And Zhang Suasi, who can play in midfield sometimes, but he will be defensively minded as well. Chances created, we'll just look at the best and the worst maybe. Stephen Kinsella on 27, and then Matteo Bianchetti, Quentin Bernardo and Andrini all have 1. The Man of the Match awards, Van Graan and Siebe Shrivers are tied on 4, and then a lot of players will be spreading these awards around the place. And there we go, Yusuf Misakni, Evander and so on all have 1. And then some players there you can see who've yet to taste success with the Man of the Match awards. Yeah, Stephen Kinsella, I'm surprised, hasn't been Man of the Match once. Passes completed, Du Shuang is the best on 86, and Boris Germain and Frank Reeves are the worst outfield players with just 63% completion. The best tacklers, we have Stephenson making 6.67 tackles a game, and then comparing that to Fusiani Cisse, who barely makes a tackle at all, so pardon that. Stop that for a moment. Shots on target, Van Graan is the best of the strikers with 2/3 of his goals hitting the target. Yellow cards, Rasmus Stephenson on 7. We have no one sent off, and then the average rating, Van Graan, who has the best, 7.53, Jiming Hao 7.45. Yeah, I'll just stop that now. Okay, my apologies, I'm usually signed out of my Discord, but there you go. That's just the way it is. Van Graan has the best average rating. Jiming Hao, surprisingly in second place. We've got Boris Germain there, also doing well. Brian Wheeler, also a top player. And then some of the worst performing players, Anthony Delage, I'm not surprised. That's why I'm not really picking him. Gary Roberts, kind of a similar situation, but injuries have gotten in the way. But he is a good player. Jose de Carlos, injuries of course have contributed there. Rakto Jovicic, also struggling. I'd like to see him do better. And then some players that should be 7.0s or more but aren't. I'd say Vanya Matrian should be. I think he's a quality player, but he hasn't really done it for me this season. Ali Bamba, who was amazing in FM13, not really showing what he's capable of so far this season. Du Shuang, probably restricted by his position, but he certainly could be doing better. And Brian Lenihan, for all his appearances, I'd like to see him touching the 7.0 average rating, and Rakto Jovicic kind of similar there. But that's the way it is. Most other players doing well. Certainly I do have an advantage over most other clubs with these high standard players all available to me night after night, week after week. So we'll certainly move on from that, and nearly 20 minutes have elapsed, so we'll probably make haste and end the episode very soon. Injuries aren't such a big deal. You can certainly tell I need to rotate players. Even though I love rotation, it is something that I have to do anyway because of the workload the players are going through. They've played a lot of games since the start of the season, and we'll try and avoid any more injuries coming up. And indeed, if you want to be part of my staff, the likes of Matthews there, he is my physio. If you ever want to join, just let me know and I'll create a staff member for you from the existing database, and I'll change their details around to suit you. But that suits that will conclude the episode now, everybody. I hope you enjoyed, and come back soon. We'll be nearly ready to play Celtic. There should be no more stoppages. This Bronze Cup final should be arranged at a suitable time, so we'll get our match against the boys 6 days from now, and we'll have to negotiate Stoke in just 3 days time. So let's see how we fare in those contests. Goodbye for now.